Today, I had the joy of a conversation with friend and Soul Care Institute alum, Sean Nemecek. Sean has written a book called The Weary Leader's Guide to Burnout, a very helpful and quite personal book designed to help leaders when they find themselves in that place of burnout. This book was nominated and recently won a silver medallion for 2024 Christian Book of the Year. We're so thrilled for Sean to receive that prestigious award. And stay tuned for the end of the conversation, where I will tell you how you can win Sean's wonderful book for free. So it's really good to be with you, Sean,
It's good to be with you, Kaylene.
and look at you in front of your ivy wall. I like
Yeah.
that. I would like for you, Sean Nemecek, to tell us a little bit of where you come from, give us an idea of what your story is.
Yeah. So I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was a pastor, and my grandfather, his dad, was a pastor. So, third generation pastor myself, and grew up in the Chicago area in my elementary years. Moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, just before high school, like a week before I started high school, which is a terrible time to move.
Yeah.
Um, but lived in Grand Rapids, went to college here, and eventually ended up as a pastor in a small town in kind of north central Michigan, near Cadillac. I was there as pastor of this little church for 18 years. Um, the church was about 65 to 75 people most of the time. We were in a town of 250,
Well,
out in the
yeah.
middle of nowhere, for what most people would think. And overall, it was a really good experience. Loving people, great place to be. When Amy went through breast cancer, Amy, my wife, went through breast cancer. They supported us and cared for
Mhm.
us in just an amazing way. And yet, carried with it a lot of the difficulties that unhealthy small churches have.
Uh,
And so around my 11th year in ministry, I went through a major burnout. It was probably 4 or 5 years in the making, but it was really just a scary time for me. There were all sorts of different things going on. I had a critic who, for that first 11 years, was trying to get me fired whenever he could. That played into it. Not grieving the losses that we experience in ministry, and just
right.
a number of things. I basically wasn't caring for my soul very well.
Did you have any physical symptoms?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Headaches, back pain, stomach issues, and
Mhm.
then just a lot of the issues that go along with traumatic stress, having dealt and seen a lot of trauma in ministry too. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Uh, my recovery from burnout started when I realized there's something broken in my soul that needed to be fixed. And I did a deep, really deep dive into soul care, leadership, anything I could get my hands on that would help me understand what was
Right.
going on. I read 86 books that year. Uh, so,
Oh.
that's kind of, I grew up in a family that said, if you don't know the answer to your question, look it up.
Mhm.
Um, and so I looked it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that led me into studying spiritual direction and just more of a contemplative life, something that
Yeah.
in Baptist upbringing I had been taught to avoid.
Mm.
How this is where I was finding real health and life. Um,
Do you remember that point, Sean, when you were having all these symptoms where you just said, "That's it. I'm broken."
yeah,
Was it a day or was it over the course of time or was it you woke up that morning and said, "I'm done. I."
yeah. There was a specific moment. So my critic recognized that I was not doing well in ministry, and my board had decided they were going to do a review because I was struggling. It's the first time they'd done a review in a decade or so. And that review didn't go well. It was really hard. I was really defensive because I was in fight or flight mode at that point. My nervous system was so activated.
Yeah.
um, because of all the stuff that I wasn't processing well. Because of that, my critic decided to launch his all-out attack and try and get me fired. That turned into like a 3-month, what felt like an inquisition from my perspective,
Yeah.
was really just testing to see if his claims were true. In the end, the board decided that I hadn't done anything wrong, or that this guy at least didn't have any proof of what he was claiming.
Right.
I don't know that they ever said, "You're in the clear."
Yeah.
Uh, but there was a point in that process where I was being questioned very intently, and I was in such fight or flight mode. It was like an out of body experience. I found myself answering questions and at the same time thinking, why are you saying that? That's not you. That's not right. But it was like the answer came out of my mouth before I could even think about it. And
Right.
that really scared me.
Mm.
And combining that with just feeling like I no longer had the ability to care for people. I'm generally a very caring, loving person, and
Yes.
that was gone, completely gone.
Mm.
Those two things really scared me.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's when I noticed that, then I said, there's something broken in my soul. And
Yeah.
it took a few months of the inquiry thing finishing up, and my critic left the church in shame and went somewhere else, and things got easier at the church, surprise. And then, yeah, after that, I was able to find the space to start really doing some internal work.
Mm. Yeah. And so your internal work, I'm guessing that's what led you to the Soul Care Institute. Is that true?
A bit of a journey yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still in ministry for several more years after that. So I had started recovering, started helping other pastors who were seeing my recovery and asking me what I was doing differently, informally coaching them. And then things started to change in our church around 2016 and into 2018. It just became clear that we weren't the ones to lead this church into the future.
Okay. Okay.
So my wife found a job that kind of all came together all at once.
Mhm.
At the same time, I started talking with a ministry that serves hurting pastors.
Mhm.
And so we left the church in 2019, and I took some time off to discern whether or not I was going to work for this ministry, because
Right.
it required raising my own funds, which was
Right.
scary to me. I was at one of their staff gatherings. They had invited me to come and see what the ministry was about. I went to that. So it was like a week-long event, and I walked in the door, and there was my very good friend, Shalini Bennett. I didn't know she was connected to this ministry, but she was a board member. And so we started talking about some of the things that had happened in my life. It'd been several years since I'd seen her. And I was telling her I've been studying spiritual direction and pursuing that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she says, "You should go to the Soul Care Institute." I said, "What's that?" I'd heard of Ruth Haley Barton's stuff. And so Shalini had been in, I think, cohort 2 or 3. I can't remember what.
I can't remember either. I think it was 4 actually.
Or okay. Yeah, so she had been in that cohort, and so we were talking. She says, "You should consider the Soul Care Institute, but here's the thing. The first cohort in Michigan starts up next week." It was
Oh, you were
it
one of
was
those
like
last minuters.
4 days for this point. We got done with that event, and I went back and I said to my wife, Amy, Shalini Bennett suggested I go to this thing. And that turned into just a big fight.
Ah, with your
Because
wife.
yeah, I'd just been away for a week, and here I am asking you to go away for another week. And
Right.
I don't really have a job right now, but I'm asking to do this expensive thing, even though it would be scholarshipped. And so, yeah, and she rightly,
Had some opinions.
yeah, yeah. And so we worked through it over the weekend. Last minute, everything came together. She ended up calling Joe, who was the president at the time, and saying, I think Sean should go to this after all. And so it was about 48 hours of whirlwind. and I was in soul care. So I really didn't know much about it, but I knew based on what Shalini said that this was a good time for me, and I needed some help discerning some things for ministry, and this would give me the space to do it. Soul care was just right for me.
And it really helps when a good friend says,
Yeah.
this is something that I think I could see you doing, or this is something that I think would be really helpful to you.
Yeah. She really is somebody who is very wise
Yeah.
and really was able to see that the work that I was already doing would be deepened and continued through soul care. And she was right.
Wow. That's wonderful. So, what was your soul care experience like? What was it? What do you remember? What stands out to you as being?
I remember that first week there was a lot of crying just because I was an emotional wreck, having just
Huh?
this big fight with my wife. Not quite sure where we were at. Still didn't have time to reconcile that. I was grieving a lot of loss from stepping out of ministry and questioning if I would ever be a pastor again or what God would have for me. I'd applied for several different jobs and made it to one of two, and then they chose the other person. So, yeah, it was a real questioning time for me. My experience in soul care after that first retreat, though, was wonderful. I found that most of the teachings were familiar, but took me to a deeper level than I had studied up to that point.
Right. Right.
The real gift for me was my listening group. Uh,
Hmm.
I
Let's
discovered
before you go on,
yeah,
let's describe what a listening group is.
mm,
Every cohort is say 20 to 25 people, and every cohort is divided up into smaller groups separately from the larger group. And those groups are called listening groups. And they are created to be a safe place to be able to process, be able to tell your story, and be listened to, not be fixed or preached at, or some people preach pray. Those
mhm,
kind of people who pray over you when they do a little sermon while they're praying. This is a time for the smaller group, say 4 or 5 maybe, to sit and really hold the space for the person who is sharing. And it's we call it Las Vegas, where what happens here doesn't go anywhere else. And it's a safe place to be able to enter into your story that is being cultivated at that time.
yeah, and that's exactly what it was for me. My listening group was really probably the first time I had a group of people who were genuinely interested in me,
Mm,
mm, at least at this level. I was usually the one providing that for other people,
right,
didn't really have many who were doing that for me. I had some pastor friends who would do that on occasion,
right.
but this went to a deeper level. There was another element of safety that didn't exist in any other relationships I had. Plus, our listening group was 6 people. We gelled really quickly.
That's
Uh,
wonderful.
and so we went deep, and I found that I really needed more friendship in my life,
Mhm.
more soul friends. And that was really the most healing part of the entire journey for me. 2 of the guys in my listening group, I still meet with on occasion, usually a few times a month on Zoom just to check in and see how we're doing. And it's been a great gift.
That's so wonderful. And I know I've heard from also those guys how much they appreciate. Not every listening group is going to become fast friends. We don't, that's not expected. What's expected is that you learn from those spaces and be able to better relate to others, learn how to hold other people's stories, learn how to hold space for people. But to have the gift of those relationships really going somewhere is an enormous, that's an enormous gift. From your experiences, Sean, you have written a book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about that process, about when you thought, you know what, I really need to put this in book form so people can actually benefit from it, so I can benefit from it, that kind of thing. What went through, what was that process?
Part of my work with PIR Ministries is coaching pastors through burnout. It's really taking my story and the things I learned from it and helping them heal as a companion and a guide. And as I was doing that work and the pandemic was in full swing, we were in isolation, and I just found myself wanting something that I could use as a guide to solidify my thinking a little bit more. So I started to write the book mostly as something to give to the pastors I was coaching through burnout.
Hmm.
Um, and part of my discernment process in that, Amy and I took a week at Fairhaven Ministries in Tennessee. It was a cabin in the Smoky Mountains where we could pray. I was working on some of my soul care reading at the time and really trying to discern the format for the book. The third section of the book was really giving me trouble. And I was reading The Critical Journey at the time, and it something in that book just helped everything come together.
Mm.
And so I started writing it a little bit more intently from that point. And I got about a month into the writing and realized that this experience was bigger than just the, something to give to the pastors I was coaching.
Right.
Uh, it really felt like God and I were meeting together as I was writing. Like this was an act of worship, and I really sensed God's presence in it. So I took a month to discern whether or not I should write a book for more the general market. Beyond pastors, could this help other leaders?
Right.
And refocused that and finished it up the following March. So it was about 5 months of process, and then started searching for a publisher. I at first sent the book out to some friends and authors and just said, "Do I have anything here?" And they all wrote back and said, "Yes, this is wonderful. You should pursue publication." And that's where it started. So the book is The Weary Leader's Guide to Burnout, a journey from exhaustion to wholeness.
Mm.
So it combines contemplative practices with psychology and theology and some biblical interpretation into kind of a holistic look at what is burnout, how do we recover from it, and then how do we do the transformative work so that we don't ever burn out again.
In your opinion, or maybe you actually have stats, you probably have stats because you're a correct kind of person. How many leaders right now would you say, let's say leaders in the church, how many of them are experiencing burnout, have experienced burnout?
From what I've seen, the numbers that I've seen, at some point in their ministry, 40% of pastors will experience some level of burnout. And depending on how you define burnout, that number could go up anywhere as high as 75%. Experience is a little bit skewed because I work only with pastors who are in crisis. And so
You can say all of them.
I see it a lot more than most people, but I would say since the pandemic, the number of pastors in burnout has risen dramatically. I don't have exact numbers for that, but I do see some major changes that have happened and just a lot more exhaustion
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say that about leaders in general, do you think?
Yeah, I think the contentious environment we have just as a culture in the United States has made everybody tired. The ups and downs of the economy, conflict at work. Yeah, there's a lot of exhausted leaders. And one of the things I've found is as the book came out last year, started to get some calls from people who were in the medical industry, emails from teachers, lots of people in various fields who are burning out. Yeah, it's not just pastors.
And we're excited to announce, Sean, that we're actually going to give away 3 of your books to anyone who's listening, and they can have a chance to win. All they need to do is click on the survey link in our reader, fill out a 2-question survey, and they will be entered into a random drawing for a chance to win one of the 3 of your books. I've read it. I've actually put a commendation in it.
Hmm.
I think it's a fantastic book. And yeah, so if you're listening to this conversation and if you would feel like, man, I would really love to have a book like that. There are three of them that we're giving away. We'd love to give one to you. I understand, Sean. Recently, you have heard something really wonderful about your book. Can you explain it for me?
This was just a week ago now, so it's still kind of real for me. But Outreach Magazine named the book their Leadership Resource of the Year for 2024. Um, uh,
Fantastic.
yeah, it's just I'm just blown away, and the review that AJ Swoboda did of the book is just phenomenal. It was, yeah, it was amazing to see.
Isn't it wonderful how something that is in you is your story
Mm.
is and you suddenly learn or eventually learn that this is something that is actually benefiting and will benefit so many people. That's got to be like,
That's my prayer.
yeah,
One of the things I did as I was writing this book was I was very aware that if I did this for my own fame, it would be very bad for my soul.
yeah,
Uh, and so I offered this as a gift to God and said, God, whatever you want to do with this book is fine with me. And he's done some pretty amazing things with it.
yeah,
Uh, just hearing from people who've been really helped by the book has been just a great joy.
yeah. It's also, that's the good side of it. It also says really the place we're at. When Outreach Magazine recognizes, yeah, this needs to be on the top of our resource recommendations. We need help, Sean. We need a lot of help. And people like you, and I'm sure other people who are engaged in the actual working with individuals one on one who are in burnout.
Mhm.
uh, Man, you guys are a gift.
So is the Soul Care Institute. It's one of my biggest recommendations to pastors who are really deeply in burnout and need to learn how to care for their soul is to do something like soul care because they need that friendship, they need that focus, they need that quiet time with the Lord that those retreats provide. And I can't think of anything better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. If people will say it was 2 years, it's a long time. First of all, it's not a long time.
Right. Quickly.
No. And also, the 2 years to me is it's pretty essential to being able to take that time away and to sit with what is happening in your soul. To we talk about the cultivation process, the soil of your soul being turned over, and to let that become real. It's not just information, but it is formation and becomes transformation in your life.
Yeah,
It's
you're really learning a whole new way to live.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it takes the time it takes, doesn't it?
yeah it does. And at the end of the 2 years, you're like, this went by quickly, but I wish it could continue. We wanted it to go on, which is one of the reasons I continue to meet with the guys from my listening group, um,
Right.
because
Right.
that rhythm has been so helpful.
Yeah. And often when people enter into the Soul Care Institute, they realize at the end of 2 years, this was just the beginning. And I
Yes.
just want to continue. And that's really the goal. That's really the goal. Sean, do you think that this is your life's work? Do you think that Buechner says where your life's joy and the world's need meet? Is this that intersection for you?
It is for now. I am definitely somebody who is wired to help people. And this engagement with contemplative practices, formational practices, is definitely something that I am called to. What shape that looks like over the years is hard to say, but I can't imagine not doing those things. And for now, helping pastors through burnout has been a great joy. There are times where working with only hurting pastors exhausting. It can get tiring, but my greatest joy right now is taking pastors from them saying, "I don't know how much longer to do I can do this," to, "I'm excited about ministry again."
Yeah.
And that's a thrill for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a thrill to know you. It's a thrill to be able to recommend. I remember last year, one time I was talking to a couple of people and I said, I know somebody who could really You could really benefit from a conversation with Sean. I don't know if that conversation ever happened. I
Yeah,
think
it did.
good.
Yep.
And it's so nice to be able to have, it sounds strange, but to have you in my sort of mental pocket to be able to say, yeah, this is somebody who actually, there's a lot of people who talk
Mm,
about burnout or whatever they're talking about, but they don't really have the experience. But it's just information they're saying. Um, you, Sean, have the experience, and it's what we can trust when somebody walks through the pain of
yeah.
whatever they're walking through, and they come out the other side, and they know how to hold that for someone else. I've said it before, it's a big gift. Thank you for writing this book
Well,
and
thank you.
for helping so many people in advance. Uh, and hopefully we can get the word out about this book and people will truly use it as a resource for either themselves or for other people.
Thank you, Kaylene. This has been fun.
It's been fun, Sean. Thanks a lot.
Okay.